Hello and welcome to Jorgy'S Stripping the Dipping. This is not your usual or the unusual co-host. This is actually Georgie, your once in a blue moon host. Since F1 Black is down with the flu and Denzel as well, I'm covering, hey. So bear with me for this episode. Today we have yet another special guest, and not only she's a fan of F1, but works closely with one of the F1 teams as one of the sponsoring teams as well. It's the one and only dashing lady, Mary Yasmine. How are you, Mary?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I'm good. And let me tell you about this lady, guys. It's not an easy. She's not an easy person to get scheduled. All right, she's like superiorly busy, and I'm so glad and excited that we finally had the moment to get her over on the episode so that we can actually have a good fun chat.
Yes, for sure. Well, thank you for having me on the podcast. I know we've had some, shall we say, scheduling issues, but I'm glad that we found some time to properly like sit down and have a conversation. Feeling incredibly honored that you asked me to be on the podcast. And what an intro! What an intro! Thank you so much.
Well, we are glad that you're here as well because you're a special lady for us as well. Come on. All right. So, the first question I'm going to ask you is where did F1 begin with you? What ignited your interest in following the sport and your initial thoughts of the sport?
Sure. So, my father was a massive petrol head. My dad, he was an executive at the National Rail Company in France. And before he started working in like, transport and freight, he did, his military service. And when he was doing his military service, what he did was work as he was a driving instructor for his battalion. So his role was to, on top of like, his like soldier duties, it was to make sure that soldiers got their driving license. And I think that was what sort of like ignited his interest in anything sort of like car related. Uh, when he finished his service, he went on to work for the SNCF, which is the National Rail Company. And he's always been interested in anything that has an engine, whether it's planes, whether it's, like motorcycle or cars. He used to own 5 cars, which is a ridiculous number of cars to be owned by one person. But he's always been like an appreciator of sort of, like anything automotive and engineering as well. And he actually pushed for me to study engineering, which I did. And through his work as an executive in the at the French rail company, he actually got to work with some of the Formula One teams, especially Renault, um, which, as you know, is also, like the French state. Also, it used to be like a nationalized company. The French state has a stake in it, and through his work, he helped them with, before we had plane travel, sort of like much more democratized. He worked with some of the teams to ensure their freight services, and through that, he got to, he got interested in Formula One, and through his contacts, he got to attend races. And so my family, when I was younger, we used to, because we're originally from Paris, but we also have, like a house in the south of France. And, we used to attend the Monaco Grand Prix sort of like every year. I remember as a child, I used to hate it so much because it was so loud and, it didn't smell very nice. And, he got invited like as a guest of Renault. And I kept up with F1, but I wasn't like very sort of like, not necessarily like interested to the point of like watching every race every weekend and keeping up with the championships and the team and everything. But I got interested in it again, and started watching it more and more, sort of like religiously. And funny enough, my work kind of went in that direction as well. So originally I used to work in fashion, and I worked in fashion for almost 10 years. And through the fact that I speak 6 languages, I was hired by a company which does many, many things related to sports. And they were looking for someone who had, like a good grasp for online marketing and copywriting, and someone who had a strong background in languages. And I was getting a bit, not frustrated, but I thought, like the work that I had done in the past in fashion, um, I didn't like see necessarily like a way to progress much more. And I'm someone that, I function, the best way for me to work is I have a challenge that I can take on. And I thought, do you know what? I think that could be a really interesting sort of like arena to work in. And so I joined the company that I work for in 2019. And in the years afterwards, we started sponsoring one of the Formula One teams. And I got to work directly within Formula One as the sort of like person within, like the creative team at large, who, had like a knowledge and interest within the sport. My employer entrusted me with that, and that's how it happened.
Well, basically, that's fate, honey. That's definitely destiny that you couldn't run away from.
Pretty much. Well, it's not, like I was told it's fate, and I was also told, it's heritage as well, to a strange degree, thanks to my father's background as well, and his experience with the sport. So yeah, but I'm
Well,
not complaining.
I mean, you can't. Literally, you can't complain about it because your F1 roots run way deeper than we thought.
Yeah, well, I think like one of the things that is also quite interesting is that, um, in terms of like, my profile and my background and my education, I've always worked in like creative writing and those kind of industries. I've worked as a journalist, I've been published in many, many media, some of them more famous than others. Uh, but originally what I studied, like my main background is engineering. I went to engineering school in France. I had so many classes, physics and mathematics, and did like so many things related to that field. So I've always had an interest in that, even though I didn't end up working in those kind of fields. And I must say, it's kind of funny how it all turned out. Like there's so many connections between my background, what I studied, and my interests, that I think it ended up working pretty well.
Well, I feel like I'm underqualified to actually interview you right now because my good God. Okay, so name all the 6 languages that you speak. I am super
So,
curious on that.
so I speak French. Obviously, I'm French. I speak Arabic because my parents, I'm half Moroccan, half French by heritage. I speak Spanish. I speak Italian. I speak, so what did I say? It was French, Arabic, English, of course. Went to an international school from the age of 3. And, I did like a lot of exchange programs throughout my education as well. I had the opportunity to live in New York City, live in Canada, in Montreal, did like 6 months at Concordia University. And we also had an exchange program with Stanford in California as well. So I spent 3 months there. So yeah, so French, Arabic, English, Spanish, Italian, and the most recent language that I'm still learning is Turkish. But that
Oh my
one was
God.
not,
So
it's all
basically, actually,
self-taught.
so basically, let me get this straight. So basically, you speak some of the major languages that exist on Earth.
I wish there's so many more languages that I want to learn. I think, like maybe like German and Portuguese are some of the languages I would like to learn.
Yeah.
But I think that, and I see that, the more I learn, like new languages and especially languages that have very little to do with the ones I already speak, I feel like I'm very lucky to have French as my mother tongue because it's one of the hardest languages that exists. And I think like unless you're like a native speaker, the all of the different things that make the language are such difficult concepts, and they're not very natural either. And so when I approach a new language, I feel like just having the knowledge of, like the grammar and conjugation and, like the morphology and everything else just makes it so much easier because it's like having a method through which actually functions. And I think that makes it just so much easier to approach new languages. And also I would say maybe like Arabic as well, because Arabic I think is also like a very tough language. The alphabet's completely different, the way that it functions is completely different. And the sounds, like the phonemes, both in French and in Arabic, some of the sounds that are part of the language are like difficult when you compare them to other languages, especially English.
Yeah.
And I think that also helps massively
Mm.
in sort of like grasping the pronunciation of other languages. So I would say I'm pretty lucky, and I think like I don't think I deserve like all the credit in the language area. I think my parents definitely deserve all of that credit because they were always for them importance very education is very important, of course, but especially like languages and just having the ability to communicate, to not have to go through an intermediary, and to just be able to express yourself and express yourself in the way that you intended exactly is so very important. And they definitely sort of like push me on that. These are like the spoken languages that I speak, but I had ancient Greek lessons and like Latin lessons as well. So all of those things help immensely in languages. And I'm forever thankful that they like instilled that kind of like that drive and those interests within me, because I think that without them sort of like pushing the whether it's education or languages, I don't think that I would have necessarily been interested in those things, and I'm forever grateful that my parents were like that. So
Oh, well, I gotta say that we need another new episode to talk about all the stuff that you've been doing because you're very interesting.
well,
So speaking of Italian
I've,
language,
yes,
I'm gonna straight away dive into F1 and ask you this
yes.
question. You're a Ferrari fan as well as an F1 fan, right?
Well, I'm not really like a fan of, well, because of work
Yeah.
I can't really show outright preferences,
What
let's put it
your
that
fan
way.
base is. Okay.
Yes, yes. So I'm not
So,
I'm not supposed to like sort of like state that I'm a fan of this team or this team, but I
mhm.
must say that Ferrari, because of like its heritage, and I must say like the life as a lifestyle brand, I think Ferrari is probably the closest one to like being a lifestyle brand as I imagine it. So they
Yeah.
don't limit themselves to just F1. they also have restaurants. They also
Yep.
have like a high fashion line, which I must say I absolutely adore. And so yeah, Ferrari moves me. But
So,
in
what's
terms
your
of
opinion on the Ferrari performance this year and the change of team principles when it comes to Ferrari as well, then?
oh, I can't. Again, I'm not at liberty to discuss, anything that is related to like um, team personnel,
Mm-hmm.
and people that work within F1 teams. I'm not really at liberty to discuss because of work and
Yeah,
confidentiality
work-related issues.
agreements
Yeah.
and things like that. And also,
Mm-hmm.
some of the people are people that I actually know on a personal level,
Mm-hmm.
and people that actually that we get along really well. So I can't
You
really
know what?
discuss
You know
those kind of
what?
things.
Okay, I
So
will spare you with that question, and I will get you on
sure.
another episode as an anonymous
Okay.
person and get your opinion on that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 If you wanna like those like voice
Yeah.
modifiers things that
You know,
sound
on
like
TV,
robotic.
yeah, we
Yeah.
call it the voice, and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
recognize
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
voice
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. 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 And then I'll be able to, or like maybe when I stop, sort of like maybe if I change role or something like that, then I'll be able to speak about the what I think. But then again, at the end of the day, within the work that I do, yeah, because it's like on the sponsorship side, because there's money involved, and because at the end of the day, I represent the company that I work for. I'm not at
Mm-hmm.
liberty to discuss this kind of things. And I don't know, even if I was, I don't really have like an opinion on anything that has to do with like personnel and things like that. F1 is a sport that is in constant flux, as we know, through like
Yeah.
the changes that you have, whether it's drivers or like personnel or things like that. And I think at the end of the day, my opinion, I mean, sure, I'll have an opinion, but I'm not sure if it really like matters at the end of the day. um it's, I think it's very easy to like sort of like look back and say, oh, they could have done this better and they did this wrong and things like that. But I think F1 as a sport, and I think that's one thing that people don't necessarily realize is, uh we never know what goes on behind closed doors. And there's a lot of confidentiality around so many things. And so I don't know whether it, like in I don't know, like 5 years, in 10 years, nobody's going to think about any of it. So I know that it's like very tempting to like comment in the moment and things like that, but I'd rather look at like like the global picture, and also think like in terms of like my own career. I don't think that my POV, you know, when things
Actually,
happen,
what
I
you
don't know if
said
it's
hit my
too,
mind. You know,
yeah,
the sentence that you said, about, in 5 years, 10 years, no one will be caring about that part, and it's actually right. I mean, do we care about what went through, or in the 90s or 80s? Like, we don't even talk about those things. We
yeah,
talk about now, the present. So every single time when a season starts, we talk about the present. So in 5 years or ten
yeah,
years actually this won't be mattered at all. So
yeah,
yeah, you're right, you're absolutely right.
yeah, yeah.
So
No,
let
and
me ask
what,
you.
from like being involved in the sport, people within teams and things like that. I think that one thing that there is definitely competition, on
Yeah.
track. And there's competition, when you have team principals talking to the media and things like that. But I think the one thing that people don't necessarily realize, and I think that, with things like Drive to Survive, and which is, supposed to be like a behind the scene look and things like that, like at the end of the day, it's like, I would say almost like a traveling, like a school trip almost, but like
Mm-hmm.
a year-long school trip where you have a crowd of people that all know each other, and like they all get along really, and they have dinner together and they're friends. And one thing that I would say to be wary of is, when you see like really inflammatory remarks in the media, especially when it comes from like the executive level of teams, so like the leaders of the teams, is to remember that like team principals, I think their role is more akin to like a politician.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the media, they will bet for their team and their guy, but take all those things with like a pinch of salt, because it's
Yeah.
not always as it seems. And sometimes when I see people fighting on the internet trying to defend their team and their driver and their team principal, it's like, I think maybe that's something that is lacking from their perspective, is that all those people that know each other and get along, and I would say maybe like the fiercest rivalries, that maybe there might be some, like it might be
Yeah.
like some cold, but yeah, I would say that it's not as I don't know, it's not as severe as like how we
It's
can
not
get on
that
like a fan
bad.
level. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
not
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
bad.
yeah, yeah. Like these are all people that can like sit down around the table and have a
Yeah.
conversation together, and not
Yeah.
sort of yeah, it's not as you know or
As
like
bad as
as
they
dramatized. Yeah, it's not
seem
as
on
dramatized
TV.
as yeah, for sure. Like a lot of it is dramatized for TV, for sure. And I
Yeah.
think that it's what gets views, and you see that a lot, not just in F1, but like in the media landscape overall. Lately, the more inflammatory, the more drama, the more sort of the more reactions it can cause, the better it is, because it gets more people talking about it, it gets more eyes on that.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, because you have to remember one thing, like the media's role is not
Yeah.
just to inform, it's revenue, and revenue is done
Yeah.
by advertising. And advertising, when companies, media companies, when they charge the advertisers that they work with, the reach that they have is one of the main thing in terms of like media spending. And so it doesn't matter whether it's a good reaction or a bad reaction. And you have had so many studies that have been done that demonstrate that whether it's social media or like anything online, something that like a bad reaction will cause you to spend more time
Mm-hmm.
on something, and that's what some media companies want you to do. They want you to stay on the
Yeah.
website.
It's
They want
totally
you.
negative marketing.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And I think that's one thing that like collectively, like we have to remember. And that's also why I'm not necessarily like a fan of reacting, like when something
Yeah.
happens, when a news drops, when you see like a quote out of context. And I think that's something that happens a lot, and sometimes it makes me really doubt the professionalism of some of the journalists that you have in sports. Is how some of the questions that get asked,
Yeah.
that are asked purely to get reactions, or some of the quotes that are being edited out of context to make it sound like a lot more offensive than what it is. And also, I think that one thing that you have to remember is that like when something is written, you lack context and tone of voice, and there's definitely a difference in how you say something and the tone that you use. And so something that can be very sort of like innocent or just said like in passing, edited out of context, it dramatizes it, and
Yeah.
it makes it sound a lot worse. And it's almost to a level where it doesn't even have any connection to how it was said. And but unfortunately, that's the way of the world, and that's how the media functions nowadays. So But you know,
Okay, so then
that's what I
let me
like to
ask you this
remember.
question. I'm gonna add it
Yes.
up to your answer. Your opinion about F1 Twitter and the attention some get to rise up to fame and how they handle their platforms afterwards. Because we've been seeing a lot of people who are Twitter users
Mm-hmm.
rose to fame because of F1 Twitter. And then some are doing very well and humble, and some are having issues. So what do you take out of that?
Well, you know, if someone wants to, like, for me, I know that, like, personally, for me is like a way to like meet people that I can have fun with, people that I can,
Mm-hmm.
we can have jokes and banter, and they don't see it as like going to war every day and saying,
Mm-hmm.
oh, so this driver's fan, I like this driver's fan, I like that. For me, that's not, like it's not like the point of interest for me of Twitter, of F1
Mm-hmm.
Twitter as a whole. So obviously you have like a lot of content creators
Mm-hmm.
within that space. Uh, for me, like if someone has like an interesting point of view, if they speak from a perspective where they add on, where they have some degree of knowledge, where they have some degree of interest, and where they can really add on to something. Because for me, that's what makes it interesting. Some people that have things to say, and they have like interesting things to say, and they bring value. And I think in that sense, you have like a lot of different content creators that do that very well. Like bringing the sport and everything that goes on in the sport to like a new audiences, and they have interactions with their audiences, and I think that's great. I think there is this what's her name again, I think Tammy Vettel Leclerc, who does like
Yeah.
a really great job of actually translating. Like, she speaks multiple languages as well, and as you know, like F1 is a sport where French, Italian, German, English are like the main languages of the sport, and she actually does like some proper work. I mean, obviously, it's not expected of someone to be like a journalist, because to be a
Mm-hmm.
journalist, like, you need to represent like
Yeah.
the media, you need to have access, so it's a bit complicated. But I think that by doing that extra work, like she clearly has identified like a need within media in F1, and I think she does it very well. Other people, I don't really see what they add on, um, and but then again,
Well, I'm not going to put you
there
in
are a lot of
trouble.
there are a lot no, there are a lot of people that don't add on, that don't really add on to anything.
Yeah.
So, but I think that within F1, I think like another thing that is quite, I don't know, like as someone that comes from like a background of like science and engineering, like you don't really see me talk about those things, because like it doesn't matter like my level of like expertise or interest. Like, these are not the things that I necessarily part of what I want to do on Twitter. But I feel like, and that's something that we've seen a lot. And I think any industries where you have like glamour, and that like really hard to get into, and a little bit like fashion. Let me tell you a story. So
Mm.
I used to work as a fashion journalist,
Yep.
and I had to work very hard, because the platform that I was working on was not necessarily famous or known, and my work was not just writing, it was also PR. So I had to create relationship with brands. I had to ensure that they recognized us. And at first, if they didn't invite us, I was the one that had to do, had to make the first step
Mm.
and make sure to say to them, look, we are covering your brand and the news about your brand, even if we don't have access now. I think that's like a good first step, creating that relationship. And I think that any sort of like industries where it's like really difficult to get into, and where you have to do like so much work from the get-go, and a lot of doors are going to be closed, and you're going to get a lot of no's. But I think if you keep it up and you show that you're not just there to have your picture taken hanging out with, like dressed head to toe in couture or whatever, and have your picture taken at like a cocktail party or whatever, I think that shows, like your dedication and how, serious you are about the work that you do, and that it's not just an image thing. And so I was doing that. It was difficult at first, but I built those relationships. And in the end, the magazine that I was working for, we ended up being invited at, Dior, Louis Vuitton, Chanel, all the high-end brands, Prada, Fendi. And because I was the senior fashion editor, I was the person that created those relationships and that made sure that I was present, at those events where we're being invited. But one thing is, a lot of people don't necessarily want to put in the hard work. And so what they'll do is try to blag their way in. But, many people within, whether it's fashion or F1, they do realize that as well. And they do realize that, not necessarily everyone has like an interest or wants to put in that hard work. And that they're more interested in sort of like the glitzer and the
shortcut
and the
part.
glamour. Yes. And one thing that did happen to me once was I was going to the Dior men's show in Paris, and I was invited. I got my invitation. They called me to confirm. Had to show off my ID, before the show to make sure that it was me. And as I was going into the venue, someone turned up behind me and they gave my name. And I had no idea who that person was, but they were trying to get in on the back of all my hard work.
Name?
Yes, they said,
oh my God.
like, there was a PR person at the door, and they asked, so what's your name? And they said, like, Mary Yasmine Arouge. And I was like, what? And so, yeah, that was I think that, sort of like exemplified exactly, this, like what I'm talking about, the fact that people don't see the work, they don't see the sweat, they don't see, the blood and tears. They just see, I would love to be in those really like glamorous, difficult to get in places, but I'm not going to do all that hard work. That's for dummies. And they try to find like, little shortcuts to that. And I think that is something that you find in F1 to a certain degree. There's a lot of, like posturing, or like, we see so many cases, where we've had like people lying about their level of access, lying about who they are, to gain followers, like it's like a race to popularity, like it's a popularity contest. I know that personally I'm not really interested in things like that, and I think that it's pretty obvious, when someone speaks from a place of expertise and knowledge, and when someone doesn't, or when they appropriate the work of others, and those kind of things. I think it's pretty silly also. I generally do not see what can be gained from things like that. I think there's a genuine value in being genuine, and being like honest about who you are, what you do, and what you can do, and like your level of not just interest, but like your skills as well. Pretending to be certain things when you're not, just so that you can gain followers. I don't like, it must require so much time to, at
And
the
you
end of the
gain
day, not be
experience
much.
through that.
So, sorry?
And you gain experience through that. I mean, for a person who takes a shortcut, they never get that experience and the lifetime lessons. But for a person
No, they
such as
don't.
you, who's been pouring all these hard work, you get all these experience and life lessons where if something's going to go happen, you literally know what's the result, what the end result is going to be, because you have experienced all those processes.
Yes. Not only that, but also I think that there's a genuine benefit in, like, I like to think of myself as a social butterfly. So
Mm-hmm.
anywhere I go, I don't need to be with someone. Anywhere I go, I'm going to make friends. Anywhere I go, I'm going to meet people. And anywhere I go, I'm going to like reach out to others. And nothing excites me more than, people that share in the like similar interests to me. But I think there's also a lot of beauty in when you have things in common with people, but they also have other things that you know nothing about, and they can introduce you to them, and you can do the same as well. And for me, this is just, it's so interesting. And yeah, I think in terms of like whether you want like a career, I know that F1 again and fashion are very similar in that respect. um like being someone that has, like a black book of contacts, and that go towards other people, and that meet with other people, and has like a genuine interest in others. Like there's nothing like it. And I consider myself very general, actually go, and meet with other people and have conversations with them, and we stay connected. And I love it. I love it. I love it. And I think that,
Okay.
being behind, I don't know, like your computer and like mentioning people, it's like, yeah, but like sometimes, like I saw there was like I think it was around Mexico time. um one of the one of the one of the stewards from the FIA, one of the only women stewards from the FIA, was being abused horribly by people online. And that made me so sad, because like that's someone that I know, that I'm connected with, and there was no reason for that to happen. And I think that a lot of things that people forget is that at the end of the day, some of those people whose name you see on your screen and on, like, reports from the FIA, like they're actual people. And when I see the downpour of abuse that goes in the direction of those people, it just makes me, it shocks me. It shocks me, and it makes me really scared, because I think what first of all, second of all, they're human, like not like humans are not infallible. Anyone can make a mistake. Like, I'm not saying that anyone made a mistake, but even if they did, it's a human being. And being abusive towards a person because, like, to someone on Twitter, they're not a real person, they're just a name that they see on the screen. It's, I don't know, it's so dehumanizing and it's so horrible. And I just don't get the need to be like that towards a person you've never met, that you're never going to meet, and who has done nothing to you personally, but like they have made a decision that is going to impact, like, I don't know, your driver or your team, which most people, like, it's not the drivers, the team that they represent. So it's like, it's like, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. The nastiness of social media sometimes, it's really
It's
horrible.
hard, and it's really harsh.
Yes.
But I mean, majority of the people that I've seen are really good people, but there's a
Yeah,
small
for sure.
percentage of people that
Yeah.
actually ruins it for every single person. But I
Yeah.
guess when it comes to the real world, it's the same as well. But it's just that
Mm,
people are way brutal when it comes to behind the screen,
yeah.
basically becoming keyboard warriors. But
Yeah.
I wanna, since we've been talking about the work and F1 Twitter and F1, I'm gonna ask you
Mm-hmm.
this question. Let's talk about your work involving F1 sponsors. How does it work?
Yes.
What sort of responsibility falls into you? And basically, what does it mean working for a sponsorship in F1?
So, sponsorship deals are usually, handled by like commercial directors and head of partnerships and things like that. The company I work for, we don't sponsor just, Formula One. We sponsor like football teams, any sport that you can think of. We're most likely involved on the sponsorship level. And so for Formula One, the sponsorship is, it's quite new. Like my responsibilities as a creative, what I do is, when we have promotional campaigns, whether it's, social media or websites or anything like that, what I do is I am the person who crafts the message. So, whether it's like slogans or copy or emails or anything that's, like online is usually what I do. Like my responsibilities are not just purely F1, but anytime, like we have F1 projects, I'm usually involved. And what my work involves as well, this year I had the opportunity to go to, whether it's like directly attending races or, just going to some of the places where the races are happening, and working on like promotion activation events for certain areas as well, because obviously we are an international brand. F1 is an international sport, so it's all about like finding opportunities to have promotion events in the areas where we're trying to develop. And if that can be related to F1, then then we definitely have an interest in that. My day to day is branding and copy, and anything sort of like any written communication is that's what I do. And so I can work on, I don't know, like a social media campaign, or like a promotion that we're doing, collaborations and things like that. Now when I go to like a race, for instance, then my responsibility a little bit more like different, because I'm there also to represent the company. And so what I do is try to create content like behind the scenes, so be in the paddock, in the garage, and create media there, and yeah, give like a behind the scene access to our customers and our followers.
Okay, so I'm done asking you all the hard questions, and I'm gonna go for the fun ones.
Sure.
So these questions are actually Denzel's favorite. Um,
Sure.
this one is called taxi, dinner, and avoid. So basically,
Sure.
you have to choose drivers whom you would like to
Mm-hmm.
take as a taxi driver, and whom you would
Mm-hmm.
like to go for dinner, and then
Mm-hmm.
whom you would definitely avoid. But
Mm-hmm.
um, there's another question coming up after. So you
Mm-hmm.
can only choose one driver per question. So you can't choose
Okay.
the same driver again for another
Right.
question. So
Okay. Okay.
let's go. So taxi, dinner, and avoid.
Okay. So taxi. Uh, well, when I take a taxi, I like to talk with the taxi driver. Usually, like I don't like silent rides, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like like sometimes depending on the time of the day when I'm taking a cab, or if I'm like with people, um, taxi, I would say, I don't know. Taxi, I would say, I'll probably say Max. Taxi. Because I feel like we'll have a lot of things to talk about, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
probably have like questions for him. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like maybe like her like, and when I say personality, I mean, personality, when you remove all the potential controversies that might have happened, let's put it that way. But I feel like, his personality, and mind, we share some like traits, and
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like we'd have some things to talk about, and I would definitely have questions for sure. And yeah, so I would probably say Max for Taxi.
And that's going to be very interesting, though. You know that, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
going
no,
to
for
be a
sure.
lot of questions, and I mean, okay, he might have some attitude issues, but he does have good
Yeah,
answers as well.
yeah, no, and also sometimes, I don't know, like sometimes the answers that he gives, or like one thing that I find really, like, Max makes me laugh a lot with his
Yeah.
reactions sometimes.
Uh-huh.
Like, when he's not having a good time, he's not having a good time, like at all, and he makes like no, like, he's not having a good time because he's going to be very vocal about it. And I know
Yeah.
that I'm like that as well. Like, if I'm not having a good time, I don't care about making anyone comfortable, or like I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say I'm not having a good time. And
It, it- I think it's a good thing, like you being open about what you feel and what you're not feeling. Because I mean,
yeah.
it depends on the person, though. But
Mm,
sometimes you actually need to let the people know that you're not having a good time, so that they can
yeah.
understand and back out.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that also, like, just, I don't know, maybe it's like culture related, but I know that, Dutch people, their style of communication is very direct.
Mhm.
And I know that my style of communication is very direct as well. So, some of the things, sometimes the way that he like reacts and the way that he speaks, they definitely, resonate with me. Now I'm not, like, I don't support Max Verstappen as, like, an F1 fan, but
Mhm.
some of the stuff that he says sometimes is really funny. Like, when he was asked in Abu Dhabi to help Sergio, and like he got on the radio and he said, yeah, the tires are fine, just tell Sergio to keep pushing. Like, what I imagined was like, he basically said, yeah, strong words of affirmation, just tell him that, strong words of affirmation. And maybe that's just the way that my mind works, but I have like a very vivid imagination. And so
Mhm.
all I could think about was like strong words of affirmation, and then you just like, and I thought that was really, really funny. And like when the was it Brazil, where that whole thing about letting Sergio get in front to help
Yeah,
him win
I
the
was like, yep,
championship. Yeah,
I ain't gonna do that.
yeah, and when he said, and I thought that was really funny, like, especially, when we saw like rumors come out about how it might have been allegedly related to how Sergio allegedly crashed on purpose to keep his qualifying position. And like the first thing that I thought was, it's been 6 months and he's been holding on to a grudge. And I find that really funny. But then again, I love a good villain, I love a good villain. Because when you think about it, like in movies, and like villains are always
Yeah.
like so iconic,
Yeah.
and like they're always like so fierce. And they're
Yeah.
always like, the villains in like, and in Hollywood are always like so amazingly dressed as well. And I thought that was quite funny, like how he had like potentially allegedly held on to a grudge for 6 months. I was like, oh wow, that's like some serious, like hater behavior. And the fact that he made like no didn't try to hide it, didn't try to say, oh no, it was just in the heat of the moment. I thought it was quite,
Imagine being patient with the grudge, being
yeah.
patient for freaking six
But
months.
yeah, no, well, you know what I said? I said he's been holding on to a grudge for 6 months, 3 more months, and we would have a fully formed human baby. And so I think, like, like some of the comments that he makes are really, really, really funny, and yeah. So I think as it's like as someone to have a conversation.
Taxi driver is Max Verstappen. It is.
Yes, yes.
So
Plus,
who are
also,
you going to choose as a dinner?
I know he would get like pretty like frustrated in traffic, and I know I get frustrated in traffic as well. So
You both
it
can
probably
suck.
turned into like a contest of like who can come up with like the most sort of like creative insults, I think, which would be pretty funny, I imagine.
So whom are you going to choose for dinner then?
For dinner, it would have to be Lewis Hamilton.
Oh, then whom
My
are you
goat,
going to avoid?
my goat, my absolute goat. I like he is such an inspiration on so many different levels. And um like like I said earlier, like personality wise, there's a lot of similarities between like Max and I. But in
Hmm.
an ideal world, if I was a perfect human being,
Hmm.
Lewis Hamilton,
Lewis Hamilton.
because his patience, his grace, his maturity, uh, how inspirational he
Yeah,
is just like I'm in complete awe. It's almost like he is not on the same level as the rest of like mere mortals.
yep,
And like the amount of adversity that he faced, and the his commitment to excellence, and also the fact that he truly understands that he's not doing all of this just for himself, but like he does it for so many more people. Whether it's people coming from like different backgrounds than the ones that you usually have in F1, whether it's like gender, ethnicity. And the fact that he recognizes that, and that he champions that, and that he understands that he doesn't want to be just like a great Formula 1 driver
yeah,
who wins everything, but that he wants to use that as fuel to create a legacy.
yeah.
Yeah, that I just have so much respect for him, and again, I wish I was more like Lewis sometimes, but I don't mind, like arguing and like fighting and things like that. So yeah, maybe it's because I don't know. Like I'm not as like um, calm and peaceful and zen
Yeah.
as
I
Lewis
mean, when it
Hamilton. I
comes to
don't have,
Louis, what I think is that when it comes to Louis, what I think is that he could choose to be just the driver that has
mm,
7, 8, 9 titles, and then lavishly spend his time, but he
mm,
chose this path, so that defines who he is and his personality,
mm,
and it's actually a great thing. Not everyone is
yeah.
like that.
No, and just the
So
fact that
yeah,
like he has so many different interests, and like despite the fact that you know maybe for some within F1, like a driver is a driver, and because have like some very sort of like old mindsets that like to imagine F1 as like this thing stuck in the past. And I've seen so many horrible comments being made by Lewis and like his fashion choices and things like that. And it's like, but people are allowed to have different range of interests. And usually like for instance, and that really resonates with me. I'm someone who has a lot of different interests, and not just like my personality is not unidimensional. I have a lot of interest in different things, and for him to express those different interests especially despite, you know, like the adversity that might arise from that and the criticism. I think that's really, you know, bold and to a certain extent brave. And that really resonates with me because, you know, like as someone who's interested in and who has worked in fashion, I know that sometimes the things that, you know, that I wear or that I like, they're not things that you see every day, but
Mm-hmm.
that's what makes them so interesting, and that's what makes them, you know, that's what appeals for me, and that's the appeal for me. And so, you know, I know about, like, you know, sort of like, you know, not being stuck like in a mold, because, you know, people love to put other people in boxes, and I think that when you refuse to be put in a box, and when you have, you know, a little bit more depth than just being this one person known for this one thing, I think it unsettles people, because I think that to a degree a lot of people don't necessarily have many interests, or they don't feel comfortable expressing their different interests because they feel like it can, you know, like be I don't know, like they feel like it can be the way that it can be perceived by others,
Mm-hmm.
you know, can bother them and trouble them, and they don't feel comfortable maybe around that. And so if you can't be put in a box, then, you know, some people might feel like, well, that's not, you know, that's not okay. That's not okay, because I want to put you in a box, and that's how I can, you know, define you, and that's how I can, you know, like define you are, and that's how I can describe you. And so when you can't be put in, some people, because they're so unsettled, they default to negativity and toxicity. And I think that Lewis has definitely experienced that, and the way that he responds to it is just by, you know, he keeps on being himself, and I think that's quite, you know, it's quite beautiful. So yeah.
Dinner with Louis it is. So whom are you going to avoid at all costs?
to
Whom are you going to avoid?
to
Like, I'm never ever going to meet this person. I really want to avoid this person. So who is it going to be?
as a driver, I don't know, because I feel like to a certain degree, like I would probably be able to have a conversation with anyone, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't really have that kind of I don't know, I don't hate any of the
But if you
drivers, like
have to
there's,
avoid a person, whom would it
yeah.
be?
I don't know, let me think about it. Who would I avoid? um I would probably avoid, maybe, like, but it's not because I have any issues with him, but it's just because I feel like we wouldn't have anything to talk about.
Talk about.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just don't feel like we'd have much to discuss,
Yeah.
you know. So
Understandable. Definitely understandable.
probably Magnuson. And, you know, like, usually I like to be around people, you know, where I can have conversations. And you know how
Yeah.
sometimes when you have conversation with someone and you don't have much to
To
say,
talk
or
about
like,
at all. Yeah. It's
yeah,
like super
and it
boring.
feels like pulling teeth.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And the
so I would
awkward
probably
silence that you
say,
get, and you're like wondering,
yeah,
should I, what else should I have to ask from this
yeah, yeah,
person?
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
should I be
yeah,
talking?
yeah, 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 yeah. So probably Kevin. I mean, no
Mhm.
disrespect to,
Hey Mag, we
he's
love
not like,
you,
you know,
but please be talkative a bit more.
no, it's not even that. It's just that, you know, like, I've never, you know, I know, like, you know, the things that, like, he's interested in, I'm not really interested by. So probably him, you know, like, I'd still be, you know,
Mhm.
respectful and
Yeah.
polite, but I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to seek Kevin to have a conversation with him. Let's put it that way. Like, if
Okay, then
Lewis
I
was
then,
there,
then
I'd
I'll ask
run to
you this
Lewis.
question.
Yes.
Then I'll ask you this question. So avoiding Kevin, all right, but if you're given a chance to either drink from
Yes.
Daniel Ricciardo's shoe or
Yes.
listen to Helmut Marko's lecture, which one would you choose?
To listen to Marco's lecture or drink from.
Ricardo's shoe. The
How long
shoey
is it?
part.
How long is the lecture?
a long lecture.
Okay, and what is the topic of the lecture?
I have no idea. Maybe
And
he's saying some sort of thing.
can I interject?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then probably the lecture.
Oh, you know what? I'm not surprised because I also chose the same answer when Denzel asked me that question on one of the episodes. And I was like, superiorly, I said definitely Helmut Marko lecture and not drinking out of a freaking shoe.
No, I think it'd be the lecture because a lecture you can, you know,
Learn a lot.
like you have no, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say a lecture you can choose to be an active participant and
Mm-hmm.
listen and talk and interject, or just not, like put your AirPods on and just
Yeah.
not listen and just be sat there for like an hour or whatever. But me, I'm someone I love to, so I think it would be the lecture. I think it would be more appealing to me. Also, drinking from someone else's shoe, yeah,
Yeah, that's not no. That's not good.
I'm
No.
okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm not drinking from anyone's shoe. Even if it was Lewis's shoe, I wouldn't drink from it.
Yeah,
So,
never, never, no
like,
way.
even my own shoe, I wouldn't drink from it because feet are disgusting. So,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know
yeah,
how these drivers were doing those things.
I don't know. I think like what they think is like the alcohol and whatever, beverage they're having is gonna kill off the bacteria. But even then, like someone else's sweat,
Yeah, it's
foot sweat.
disgusting. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why it's called athlete's foot because athletes,
Hmm.
when they sweat from their feet, it's like breeding ground for like fungus. So, no thanks.
Well, basically, these guys were drinking fungus.
I mean, maybe. But I'm not saying that necessarily, like Daniel has like dirty feet or whatever, but I'm just saying I'm not taking any chances. Especially with my health. Nah.
All right. So the next question for you: pineapple on pizza, yay or nay?
Absolutely fucking not. No. No. No, 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 no. But even like stuffed crust is a
Uh-huh.
no. 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 No.
Y-
Why
You know,
would you
do you
put
know the answer that we got from Amanda Busick? When we asked
no?
her when she came over the episode, she said yes, but she gave us a very peculiar answer. She said, "Have you guys tried pineapple on hot dogs? Apparently, in US they have pineapple on."
Yeah, but like the US is not, the country that is most famous for
Yep.
lifestyle and gastronomy. Like I would rather trust, the Italians, the French on those things. And so I'm gonna say no.
And the next question.
Yes.
You went to this year's Austrian GP. So how was the experience in
The
at there?
Hungarian.
Oh, sorry.
I
Okay,
was at the
Hungarian. Let me
Hungarian.
correct
Yeah.
you. The Hungarian GP. So how was that experience, and would you recommend it for someone to go back again?
Well, Budapest is a gorgeous city, and like the architecture is breathtaking. And it reminded me of Paris. And I was told, so I made some Hungarian friends when I was there, and they told me that apparently, like the city, the architecture of it was inspired by Paris. It was Osman, who Paris, the Paris as we know it now. Large avenues with like trees along the avenues and great boulevards and perspectives on like monuments and things like that. The blue tiles, the magnificent sort of like front of those buildings, and I definitely I definitely felt that it reminded me of Paris so much, my hometown. So, and as a city is really, really nice. Like I never, I felt very safe. The food was incredible as well. I definitely have like, places that I would recommend in Budapest. And for the Grand Prix, Um, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. You know, I mean, I was really lucky with work. Got to be, you know, in the paddock. Uh, Experience, you know, just being in the garage. You know, the things they're not able to get on camera. Um, like I was able to experience those with my own eyes, and that was really, really incredible. And I really enjoyed it. Um, Now, in regards to like, you know, the fan experience, I didn't really have any trouble. I don't wear merch. I'm not allowed to, you know, when I go somewhere for work, we're not allowed to wear anything, you know, that shows like preference for like a team or like a driver. So, but even then, you know, I was with friends, and you know they were wearing merch and they had like flags and things like that. And you know, all the like most of the fans that we met, you know, like Dutch Max fans, for instance, they were actually really nice. You know, they wanted like pictures with my friend and her flag, and some of the people were actually really nice. Like we met a guy from the Netherlands who drove there with his children, and he had his entire car um, like like modded to have like, you know, the McLaren Golf livery on it, which was really cool. And yeah, overall, like the experience was really positive. Now, getting to the track and back was a bit of a nightmare because it's like 10 kilometers out, and it's in the middle of the countryside. And you know, so to get there, I think you can take like a train and then like a shuttle bus. The shuttle bus to get there, it was probably like the quickest way to get there, because if you start getting in like cars and things like that, there's so much traffic. And So to get there wasn't too bad. To come back, the lines for cabs and shuttles were just so long. I think on the second day we were in the queue for like 3 hours. But I got to meet some really nice people in the queue, and you know, I made some friends in the queue. So you know, it's not all bad. And On the last day, because we didn't want to have to wait another 3 hours, you know, wanted to get back to the city and be able to have dinner and everything. So what we did, and I posted some pictures on Twitter, we actually walked, I think like 10 kilometers in the Hungarian countryside. Like we took the scenic route, you know, and that was an experience. But you know, when you go to a Grand Prix, like unless you're, and I think like even if you're like in you know, you get like the VIP passes or whatever, it's so complicated. Like I would really recommend, like if you can afford it, I think a helicopter ride is probably the best way to get back. But I think it's all part of the experience, almost like going to a festival to a degree. And you know what? There were people in the line, you know, of traffic. I remember there was a guy in like a Tesla, and he was like, "Yeah, let's race." When he saw us walking along, and I swear to God, by the time we got to the train station to go back, he was still like 5 miles back behind us. And so in the end, we beat the traffic and we beat the queue. It just took some walking. And Yeah, in the end, you know, we got there all safe. And what I would recommend when you go to a Grand Prix, you know, battery packs for sure. And yeah, comfortable shoes. I was wearing heels. I did kilometers in the countryside in the uneven heels
That deserves an
of the
award.
Hungarian countryside. I was wearing heels, but you know, I had to for Lewis. You know, I had to do it for the drip. So yeah. But you know, if I survived wearing heels, I mean, I had horrible blisters the next day, but it was all worth it because the pictures looked really good and amazing. So I thought, you know what? It's all that matters. No one can see my blisters in the photos. So yeah. I
Well,
would recommend
that
it.
deserves an award.
We didn't see any of, because I know there were a lot of like, the negative things, people burning merch and being, like some of the things that we've heard as well, sexual harassment and things like that. We didn't really experience any of that. But and I think that maybe like to a degree, some of the things that are put in place to respond to those kind of things, I don't think they're necessarily appropriate from the perspective of like from a practical point of view. I would say texting a number when you see abuse, when you put 300,000 people in the same place, you don't get reception. Your Wi-Fi network is gonna get, you're not gonna be able to get connection to the internet. You're not gonna be able to place phone calls. You're not gonna be able to send text. So you can't really have like a response, especially when things like that happen. I think that the response needs to be really like immediate, because what happens is people behave like that and then they're just going to get lost in a crowd. So I would probably, like, in festivals, usually you have like people like chaperoning, and people that you can actually go to. They're not necessarily just the security from the track, but there are people that you can turn to and go and talk to them. And I think that maybe if one thing needed to be changed in relation to Grand Prix, I would probably say, to have more people that are very visible, almost like a marshal post, but for the crowd, where if you need to report anything, then you know exactly where to find those people and report it right away, rather than have something really horrible happen to you and then you're just in a crowd and you're scared and have like a panic attack or whatever, and basically there's nothing that you can do because of you being in a crowd, and the fact that you don't really have anyone that you can turn to. So I think if that was put in place, I think that would maybe enable people that you didn't really used to see at races. So people from different like ethnic backgrounds and women to be more comfortable at
Mhm.
Grand Prix when those horrible things happen to them, because unfortunately, like, there are so many assholes out there, just in F1, I mean, in the world at large. And if you give those people if you give them the feeling that they can act like that and get away with it, they will continue acting like that. If you have like a very strong response, and if you actually make it easier for those people to not only be identified, but to actually face consequences. Like, I wouldn't be against, banning people from attending races, like the way that you see it in football. It's kind of like similar to like hooliganism to a certain degree. Um, and you look at the way that, football clubs have dealt with it. Um, I think that would be um, it would be at least, like a tangible approach to solving those problems and ensuring that that the message is very strong, that those type of behaviors have no place in the sport.
True. That's definitely true. Alrighty. So I'm going to ask you the last question of the day. Tell us,
Sure.
our listeners, where to find you, your social handles, and any last words you would like to say.
Sure. So my social media handles are at Mary Yasmine, MaryYasmine, all across social media, mainly Instagram and Twitter. These are like the two platforms that I'm most active on. Yeah, and you can find me there. Follow my adventures across F1 and other sports as well. I love football, so I also get to do things related to football, and I love to travel as well. So if you want to follow that, then yeah, that's where you'll find me. Um, any last word? Well, a massive thank you for having, of course. And it was a bit difficult to like, get me like, figure out scheduling and things like that, because obviously, I work and I have like a lot of events that I attend and things like that. But I'm really glad that we managed to put this together. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. And hopefully, keep an eye out for the coming weeks slash next year, because there's so many exciting things. I'm not allowed to talk about them yet, but there's so many exciting things that are coming up. And yeah, I'll be sure to share those things as well.
Well, there you go, folks. You'll be having a lot of excited stuff to check it out. So do give her a follow and follow her adventures, because we definitely enjoy following her adventures. And now I'm even more curious about what. Well, folks, that's about it for today's Stripping the Dipping Motorsport series. And I am super thankful for Mary for joining us today, because trust me, she's a very, very busy woman. And I am super grateful that she actually managed to share her journey over our podcast. So, this has been your not the usual or the unusual host, but once in a blue moon host, Georgie. Hope you guys have a just like in Italian. Ciao.
Ciao.